Hey folks, it's Fernando doing another video here for the Modern Survivalist, and in this video I'm going to be covering what I see heading our way for the year 2015, maybe the years to come as well. This is based on a post that I did for my website, themodernsurvivalist.com, link somewhere there below, that was called The Future of Preparedness and Modern Survivalism. If you want to check that out, it's going to be the link there below in my website. Also, I'm going to be going through a little bit of what Ron Paul wrote in his 2015 prediction. This is from ronpaulinstitute.org. Guys, check it out. Ron Paul is one of my favorite politicians, maybe my only favorite politicians, because I pretty much lost hope in basically all of them. I think that politicians by now are simply an extension of what Ron Paul calls the corporate elite, and he even sometimes uses as the same thing, the corporate elite and the 1%. I don't think that the 1% is the corporate elite. I don't think it's even the 0.001%. I think it's the corporate elite is really a handful of people that basically could fit in this room, and these are the guys that own, at the end of the day, when you go up the ladder enough, you realize that it's a handful of people that own the media, that own the military complex industry, that own the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and especially, most of all, the banking, the financial sector. Those are the guys that are really running the world. Those are the guys that are really benefiting from all the crap that we're seeing. Those are the guys that are the real bosses, not the presidents of the countries that are simply puppets, just so as to create a smoke screen and hide what's really happening behind curtains. So back to Ron Paul's article. I think it's very good. He goes into detail. I wish he would go more into this regarding the corporate elites. He makes great points regarding welfare states and the police state, that he thinks Ron Paul is already saying that we are already, especially folks in the United States, are already living in a police state. He makes great points regarding the militarization of the police in the United States, which is something that we've talked about here before. Very concerning, and it's so obvious. I mean, it's happening so clearly. There's no hiding it. The police is being militarized to an extreme that it's unbelievable. Why is that? Because they are the guys that are going to be there to enforce all this the restriction of freedom and liberties. There has to be a strong arm to enforce that, and that's what's already happening. All liberties, says Ron Paul, in America today are under siege. I completely agree with him. It's sad. I still think that there's hope, but it is what it is. The welfare state, the social welfare. Now, when you think of social welfare, social as in society, as in people, welfare as in well-being, there's nothing wrong with social welfare. The problem with social welfare and the problem with redistribution of wealth, again, redistribution of wealth, is it bad that people get their fair share of their labor? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But the thing is that what is being sold to us as social welfare is actually tricks and schemes by which this corporate elite canalizes and channels the money of the entire population to their own pockets. The wealth distribution that's being sold and promoted through the government, which, as I was saying before, is just the government is basically, as of right now, simply a tool of the corporate elite. The redistribution of wealth is being correctly redistributed to their own accounts, to their own pockets, to their own interests. And this is not going to be changing anytime soon. Ron Paul believes this is going to be intensifying and getting worse through the year 2015, and I completely, absolutely agree with him. War on poverty, another, just more lies and more ways of taking away. I don't think that, Ron Paul talks about the government being the problem and such. I think that you still need regulations, you still need a government. I don't think there's anything intrinsically bad with a government, as long as a government is a true representation of the people, which is no longer, which it hasn't been that way for many years. But you do need a government that should be, of course, much smaller than what we already have in any country, but a small government that truly is an extension of the representation of people, and is simply representing the interests of the true majority of people, and not just a small sector that has a vested interest on it. Yeah, in terms of violence in inner cities, I think that's something that's going to be happening. You're going to be seeing more outbursts of it. Ron Paul mentions that as well. As someone that has lived in more dangerous places than most people in America have, that's really not what worries me the most. I'm not worried nearly as much about looters and such, as I'm worried about the higher crime rates that are going to be coming soon. That's the kind of thing that really gets to you. That's the kind of thing that piles up. And of course, it all works towards militarizing the police. The more violence you have, the more riots you have, the more outbursts that you have, such as the one seen in Ferguson. That's all going to be fueling the militarization of police, the restriction of freedoms and liberties. It's going to be fueling the excuse for the military industry complex, who has to have even more money. The lobby is going to be getting worse in that regard as well. In terms of the rich getting richer, Ron Paul writes here, the rich are getting richer, but why? Well, as long as people fail to understand that all this thing that we have in terms of Republicans and Democrats, right and left, it's all basically the same thing. When you look at people talking about CNN being liberal, CNN is liberal and Fox News is conservative. When you look at who actually owns these media channels, it's always the same thing. When you look at who finances Republicans or Democrats, it's many times the same corporations. The same corporation that finances the Democrat politician is the same corporation that has no doubt in putting money on the Republican one as well. It's he's betting on both horses. It really is not going to be making much of a difference who gets elected. It's already being bought. It's already in their pocket. It's already working for them. Indeed, the rich are getting richer and the poor poorer, and that's something that we're going to be seeing more this year and in years to come after that. I see a clear reduction of the middle class, especially in terms of a shift of what used to be middle class becoming a poor class, at least by first world standards. Middle class is definitely something that is under attack. It's losing in terms of quality of life. I'm going to be getting into a second in terms of how quality of life is being affected in terms of standards of living, in terms of security, in terms of crime, in terms of food, education, all that stuff in a second. Police brutality, our liberties under attack, right, Ron Paul? He makes great points. I wish he would cover a little bit more on the corporate elite that he mentions and how it's so strongly linked. The federal government and war on us. He has some great points in terms of the military presence of the United States around the world, how the foreign policy that it has basically fuels most of the problems. And when you look into it, you realize that all the wars being fought, in foreign soil, as Ron Paul puts it, and how that's against what the founding fathers had in mind. The founding fathers didn't have in mind, they didn't think of a United States intervening in foreign governments, having basically colonies all over the world. Ron Paul talks about that as well, about the neo-colonialism, which is it's something that is against what the founding fathers had in mind. That's not something that they wanted, but it's still something that's happening right now. And that's basically one of the worst problems, and one of the hardest to eradicate evils going on right now. The machinery, the economic machinery involved there is massive. The money in buying weaponry, the money in being spent by the military, the money being spent so as to finance the future enemies in many cases. And this is something of public knowledge. In many cases, today's enemies were yesterday's allies. You're fighting, the United States is currently fighting people that they've trained, in some cases even months ago. They were training them, they were arming them, and now they're going to war against them. And you have to arm the United States Army so as to fight these same folks. And then once you capture their weapons, destroy their weapons, the ones that you've already sold them before, I mean, it's all also corrupt in so many ways. And all of this, it's not only costing money, it's costing lives as well, on both sides. All of this is very well explained, by Ron Paul when he talks about ISIS. ISIS, I mean, you don't have to be a genius, but what is it, like months after the war is supposedly over in Iraq, in Afghanistan, victory never actually being declared or anything, but supposedly a few months after the troops were sent back home, all of a sudden you have an entire it's not even a country anymore. It's ISIS. What is it? You're not even fighting a country anymore. You're fighting an organization that it's all over the place, and it was already there under your nose, and you never realized that it was happening. And just after you leave, you see that basically the entire country is already under ISIS control. All of a sudden, it's very hard to believe. It's very naive to think that this happens for no reason whatsoever. The foreign affairs of the United States are going to be causing quite a bit of problems, and domestically as well. This is something that Ron Paul covers as well. The enemies that are being created with all of this, the idea that you can intervene, occupy, invade countries, and there's not going to be any repercussion after that. It's very naive in many ways. These always end up coming back to haunt you later on. Conclusion of Ron Paul towards a peaceful revolution. Again, I end up agreeing with him in terms of the best way to fight this is through knowledge, through information. More people have to realize what's going on so as to do something about it. As long as people keep on falling for this pro wrestling nonsense of having, sides, as long as people think that there's a right and left, Democrats and Republicans, and they're all fighting one another and they have different interests, no, they have the same interests. They're representing the same people, and it's not you. It's the interests of the corporate elite that is basically running the entire system. as long as you don't own the money in your pocket, man, it's there's really no way around it. You are basically a slave to the system. And whenever we've talked about why is it that the world is not going to be ending. The world's not going to be ending. It's going to be like this, just worse. Less middle class, more poor, more poverty. Why is that? And why is it that it's not going to be collapsing in a catastrophic way? Because there's no money to be made out of that. There's money, guys. It's simple. You don't kill your slaves. You make them work for you. That's what's happening here. So back to what I see happening in this year and the year to come. In terms of crime, self-defense, security, I see crime simply getting worse than it already is. More violent, the social struggles because of ethnic, religion, all also fueled by the government itself on so many ways, through the media, through the foreign policy that they have. It's all going to be creating a more stressful, more violent society. Crime is going to be getting worse, and you're going to be more likely to end up having to defend yourself one day. What I see here is that it's important to focus on what's practical and useful. There's lots of training in terms of armed self-defense, in terms of preparedness, and you see lots of rifle classes, military-style training and such. It's not as bad, it's not as useful as something that's more realistic. And by this I mean focus mostly on handgun training, on learning to master the gun that you're already concealed carrying. If you don't have your concealed carry license, by all means, wherever you can get one, where it's possible for you to do so, that's something that you should be doing right now, and being extremely proficient with it. Don't just take a handgun class and jump to a rifle class because you think it's more entertaining, or because the rifle is more useful. The gun that's going to be useful for you is the one that you have on you, with you, in a parking lot. It's not going to be an AR, it's not going to be an AK, it's going to be whatever you're concealing. That's the gun that you should be spending. To be honest, no one has so much time that they can afford to master a handgun and master a rifle to the same level, to the same degree. Focus on the one that you're going to be using. I know that as of right now, for most folks in the United States, this isn't nearly as much of an issue as I've seen it be in Argentina. In Argentina, pretty much anyone in the armed community knew someone that had, pretty much the majority of people had been involved in one incident or another. Many had even killed people in self-defense. Basically, all of us knew someone or several people that have been involved in gunfights. In the United States, it's really not to that point yet. Usually, when you think of this, folks in the United States, if you know of anyone that killed someone, it's probably because they were in the military and served and such. But you don't know of your neighbor shooting someone in a parking lot, or you don't know of your neighbor or your uncle shooting someone in a carjack attempt. That's the kind of thing that happens in Argentina, and I see how this can become more and more common in the United States in the years to come. The way you prepare for this, being skilled with the gun that you already have with you. But most of all, in terms of awareness, in terms of personal security and avoiding problems as much as possible. That's the greatest, the best outcome that you could possibly have is avoiding this entirely by having a great level of awareness. Awareness is going to be essential in a more violent a future where crime is more of a problem than it already is. In terms of food, when you usually talk about food and survival and preparedness, you think of food because you're going to be starving. You think of food in terms of I need food to stay alive, and that's absolutely correct. That is absolutely true. You do need food to stay alive. And if there's a lack of, or if there's problems in the distribution, or if you cannot afford the food, you're definitely gonna be digging into your supplies. But I also see a problem, interestingly enough, with the quality of food that people are eating. With more poverty, which beyond any doubt you're going to be having more poverty, with more poverty there's a problem of food. And it's a problem of food in terms of the quality of food, of what people eat. I don't see, how many people are starving to death right now in the United States? I would say not many. How many people are dying today because of obesity and because of the crap that's being eaten as food? The junk food that we're all eating, that it's being sold to you, that's killing hundreds of thousands of people every year in the United States and around the world. This is a problem that's going to be continuing to grow. So I see it, ironically enough, I see people that have buckets full of rice and beans for the end of the world, but at the same time, maybe they're going through tough economic times and they're eating junk food, saving money, not realizing that maybe they would be in a much better position if they ate today that food that they're saving for the end of the world. And this is, I'm sure this is going to be something that lots of people are actually going through right now. People that are overweight, that are even obese, and they have buckets full of stuff that is much healthier than what they're eating right now. All right, and the quantities are not right either, and the quality of food is not right either. You're much better off eating those rice and beans that you're saving for the end of the world. You're much better off eating those now, getting used to that. But what happens is that people think, yeah, I don't actually like it. It's not tasting really as good. My family does not like it. They're not eating it. But when the end of the world comes, they're going to be appreciating that and eating that. Well, while you're thinking that way, your family is being fed with junk food that's killing them as of right now. So it's important to do a lot of research. I've written about this before. I think it's very important, and it's definitely something to look into, because if there's something that's killing people right now, it's the junk that's being eaten. And in some ways, in some aspects, in Europe, it's not as bad. Especially, in terms of schools, you don't have Coca-Cola advertising in schools here. At least as of right now, you don't have Pizza Hut, you don't have McDonald's. You have those in the United States. You have these corporations selling the junk that makes you sick, while at the same time they sell you the junk that's going to be keeping you alive, so that you don't die. The same corporations that invest in the food industry are the same ones that invest in the pharmaceutical industry as well. And medical care, a different topic, is going to be huge as well. Medical care is going to be, it will keep to get more expensive each passing year. With the free medical care, as we all know, nothing is really free. It's going to be more polarized than it already is. People that can afford it and people that can't. And health is going to be it's going to be suffering because of that. People are, the difference between those that can afford it and those that cannot. You'll have people sick because of the junk they eat, spending fortunes in medication that they could probably have avoided in the first place if eating correctly. But the cost of medical care will continue to get more expensive. The lobby, the interest, the financial interests in the medical sector are going to be huge as well, overpriced to great degrees. Education also suffering as well. Soon enough, the public education will be so bad that people will have little choice left but to send kids to a private school. It's already a matter of where you're living. You're going to be paying through that as well. If you live in a higher end, a rich neighborhood, you may have better schools. But I think that eventually we'll get to a point that, like it happens in South America, that even in the expensive and the rich neighborhoods, even in those, the public school is just simply no good. That's something, in many ways, it's the United States and many of the developed nations are becoming more third worldly. In many ways, that reduction of the middle class, that squeezing of the quality of life of the middle class by the elite, so as to improve their profit margins, improve how much money they're getting through the different social plans and the different schemes that are simply designed so as to canalize and take the money out of the people and into their own pockets. Poverty eventually is what it comes down to. I see a future in which it's people are going to be struggling, guys. Let's be honest. People are going to be struggling in this year and the following one. It's going to be each year a little bit more difficult with inflation that's awfully being manipulated in the United States already. Very much like it's been happening in Argentina for many years now. The inflation is a lie. They're not taking into account things that make no sense. So as people keep on struggling, as their quality of life keeps dropping, a handful of folks keep making billions each year. Guys, if you want to prepare for that kind of survival, I recommend my book, The Modern Survival Manual, Surviving the Economic Collapse, linked there below. It's what worked for me in Argentina, what still works today, and what unfortunately a lot of people will end up going through soon enough, if not already, as we know. A future that's not nearly as interesting as what we see in portrayed in Hollywood. It's not the end of the world. It's not nothing like that. It's simply the same that we know right now, only worse. Guys, subscribe, share, take care, have a great day. See you in our next video.